This morning, the president is also digging in on his national emergency declaration to get that money for a border wall, telling Republican lawmakers not to be weak on border security. That's one of his tweets this morning. This is just a day, of course, before the House votes on whether to block that emergency declaration.
Meanwhile, 58 former national security officials, both Republicans and Democrats, we should note, are releasing a joint statement this morning slamming that declaration. Joining us now, Alex Marquardt, CNN senior national correspondent with more. Alex, it's quite a list here. It is a bipartisan list, and their words are pretty damning.
It is a resounding joint bipartisan rebuke of the president and his declaration of a national emergency there on the southern border. Let's just take a quick look at some of these names. 58 of the most prominent names in the national security space. You have Democrats like Madeleine Albright, some of the foremost officials in intelligence, John Brennan, James Clapper. And then a handful of Republicans as well. Thomas Pickering, who served at the UN under George H.W. Bush, Chuck Hagel, who was Secretary of Defense under President Obama, and Elliot Cohen, who served at the State Department under George W. Bush. So it is very much bipartisan. And in this 11-page statement, these 58 officials could not be clearer. Let me read just part of this statement. They write, "Under no plausible assessment of the evidence is there a national emergency today that entitles the president to tap into funds appropriated for other purposes to build a wall at the southern border." Now, this letter is designed to support other efforts to block the president's declaration of national emergency. You have 16 states that have filed lawsuits. The ACLU is suing. But Poppy and Jim, as you mentioned, the biggest one is the House taking up this resolution in a vote tomorrow that would be designed to block the president's declaration of a national emergency. Of course, the Democrats do control the House. The big question, and this is coming from White House officials themselves, is not whether that resolution passes, it's by what margin. The president has said that he would veto it, but it would be a very strong message sent by Democrats. Nancy Pelosi, of course, the Speaker of the House, has called the president's actions lawless. She said that it does violence to our Constitution. And the underlying fear here by these 58 officials is that in declaring this national emergency, that when, in fact, in their view, there is an actual national emergency, that it would take away from the measures and the actions that go into effect when a national emergency is declared. Jim, Poppy?
All right, Alex Marquardt, great reporting. Thanks so much. With us now is former public policy director for Mitt Romney, Lonnie Cheng. Good morning to you, Lonnie. So what makes this different from so many other things that many Republican lawmakers in the Senate might not like and say they don't like, is they actually have to vote on this. McConnell's going to have to bring this to the floor, and they're actually going to have to vote on it. And I'm interested in, their concerns ranging from the door this opens for Democrats, future administrations, to declare national emergencies on things like guns or climate change, and also just not believing that the facts underlie a national emergency here. What kind of predicament does this put Republican senators in?
This is a worst-case scenario, Poppy, for Mitch McConnell and for the Republicans in the Senate to actually have to be on record, I think, voting on the president's emergency declaration. Look, there are a series of different reasons why Republicans might take issue with this. You've noted some have constitutional concerns. There are policy concerns. There are also electoral concerns. You've got a few Republicans like Cory Gardner of Colorado, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who are going to be in very competitive re-election campaigns in 2020 in states that are trending purple. And for them to be on record having to potentially vote with the president on this emergency declaration puts them in a very difficult position electorally. So this is on no one's wish list of votes on the Republican side in the Senate.
Though we've been here before on issues, makes me think of the Deripaska sanctions, right?
Right.
No one really wanted those lifted. They didn't want to vote with the president on weakening measures against a Russian official, accused of meddling in the election. And yet, what happened? A majority of Republicans voted against that 57, but not enough. They didn't get the 60 votes they needed. Of course, here, if the president really is serious about vetoing, you need to get to 67 Republican senators. I mean, do you see that possibility happening, given all the political concerns that you laid out?
Yeah, Jim, they're not going to get to 67. It's possible that they'll get to the 60 necessary to send it to or not to the 60, but they'll actually have votes to come together to send it to the president for his veto, as you say. But this is a much more public and much larger issue than the Russia sanctions vote was. This is something that has been closely covered, that you've got all of America watching, and I think implicates these constitutional questions, these legal questions, much more directly than any other tough vote that Republicans in the Senate have had to take. So this is a different situation.
Do you think, Lonnie, it matters to those Republican senators in terms of how it looks, how the optics look, that the argument that the administration has made for this national emergency, many of those so-called facts are not supported by actual facts, whether it comes to where most of the drugs come across, into this country, or the volume of illegal border crossings.
Or the terrorists are coming across the border, right? I mean, a lot of specious claims.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, so if they vote yes, are they then sort of de facto saying we agree with those statements from this administration?
Well, I think they certainly are in agreement. The challenge is if they vote against the president, they raise the possibility that they're going to get attacked by the president and by other Republicans as being weak on border security. You already saw that in the president's tweet this morning. It puts these Republicans in a difficult position because on the one hand, they all got to Congress saying they're for border security, and now potentially they're being put in a situation where if they vote against the president, they're going to be called weak on border security. The bigger challenge here, though, is if you look at the president's emergency declaration, it relies on this underlying law that says the military is required, the use of the military is required. That's a very, very high bar, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, for many of these Republicans to be on board with that.
Well, let's see. Is it principle or politics?
There you
This will
go.
be yet another test. Put your money down now. Where you think it'll end up. Lonnie
Thanks,
Chen,
Lonnie.
always good to have you on.
Thank you.